To peek behind the scenes of our universe, you don't need a multi-billion-dollar Hadron Collider. It turns out that's not necessary. A red laser, a piece of acoustic foam, and a fraction of a gram of the most powerful psychedelic on Earth will do. And the wall in your home will become transparent. On the other side, you'll see a flowing cat straight out of the Matrix and an unknown entity. And most strangely, you won't be the only person to see it. This shouldn't be possible. A red laser, a piece of black matte foam on the wall. A guy with a glass pipe is just exhaling smoke. And somewhere in that room, exactly at the moment when the air leaves his lungs, someone starts whispering the same words over and over again. Oh my God. Different people, different sessions, the same laser and the same piece of wall. Sooner or later, every time, the same statement is made. Cat. I've shown this to over 100 people, and I keep wondering how it's possible that we all see the same thing. This sentence keeps bothering that one guy, Danny. It doesn't matter what these people saw, it's irrelevant. Whether it was real or not, it's about the math itself. Over 100 strangers have visited the same room. A red laser, dimethyltryptamine, and one mysterious pattern that appeared before the eyes of each of them. Danny refers to this pattern as the source code of reality. I know, those are pretty strong words, but Goler believes what he says. To repeat his experiment, you don't have to be a millionaire. All you need is a red laser, 650 nanometers, available on Allegro, a diffraction grating, which is a thin plastic disc that splits the beam, creating a wide shimmering fan, and a matte surface. Ordinary acoustic foam, like the kind used to soundproof recording studios, is enough. It's not a big secret. Practically everything can be bought online instantly. Well, almost everything. The key element of the experiment is the drug DMT, one of the most powerful psychedelics whose effects are short-lived but extraordinarily intense. After a few minutes of tripping from smoking it, a person experiences things that are hard to put into words. What happens next? Goler came up with a procedure that theoretically shouldn't work. The guy smokes DMT. A laser is aimed at the foam and the person participating in the experiment. They are supposed to look at the light, or more precisely, through the light, as if they wanted to look through a window. If they do this at the right angle, they will start to see things that absolutely shouldn't be there. Symbols appear, lines flowing downward, tight rows of something that many describe as Japanese katakana. To others, these mysterious symbols resemble ancient Aramaic or strings of symbols, as if taken straight out of the movie The Matrix. These symbols have depth. They are not flat. They move in space as if the wall suddenly became transparent like a window. If you change your viewing angle, you start to see other layers. There were times when people asked Goler directly if it was some kind of light trick. Then he would move the laser, but the pattern would stay in place. Sure, I could dismiss this story if it was just one conspiracy theorist, not some basement dweller, but the fact is there are over 100 witnesses, and most of the sessions were recorded on video. Goler claims he never suggested anything to them beforehand. He doesn't throw out the word cat. He doesn't talk about the Matrix. He hands them the pipe, shows them the foam, and afterwards asks them one question. What did you see? And what he hears back from people doesn't sound like a memorized poem. He always hears the same thing. Flowing script, depth, pattern. Oh my God, what is this? These words come from the mouths of people who have tried everything, as well as those with zero experience with substances. Everyone says they've never seen anything like it in their lives. According to them, the consistency and repeatability of this vision is proof that we're not dealing with hallucinations, but with something that has structure, space, and simply exists there. To understand why their experiences are unique, we need to focus on two things. First of all, a DMT trip is an extremely personal matter. 3 people can smoke at the same time and see 3 different worlds. One is strolling through diamond cathedrals, another is talking to elves, and the third is standing on flour and conversing with his deceased mother. That's why reading DMT trip reports is like reading someone else's diary. Secondly, what Goler does is the complete opposite of this principle. Strangers, without any prompting, start describing exactly the same thing. Their accounts are too precise for us to call it a coincidence. Zero spirituality, zero beautiful fractals, only flowing symbols. Goler himself doesn't beat around the bush. It's worth listening to him because the guy has the courage to talk about it. Goler speaks. There are only two options. Either I've gone crazy in the most spectacular, visually repeatable way in the history of humanity, and I have it recorded on video, or, and these are of course his words, this is the greatest discovery in our history. Perhaps he has found a cheap, repeatable procedure to see the source code of reality. Many people might have doubts. I'm not surprised, because guys tripping on dimethyltryptamine staring into a laser are not scientists. And we'll come back to that, by the way. But what if the guy really did find something? What if scientists are able to prove it? What questions will we have to ask ourselves then? The hunt? A large number of people coming back from a DMT trip analyze themselves. What kind of person they are, what they do well, what they do wrong. Goler came back from his trip with a question that only a handful of people in this community ever ask themselves. If this place is real, is there anything I can bring back from there? Some hard evidence that would survive the trip? Some fragment that could be frozen, recorded, shown to others? It doesn't sound like a shaman's question, but more like the question of a researcher who has decided that behind a DMT trip there is a specific system which must have an interface. And every interface can be hacked. Goler spent years searching for an entry point. But to understand why he even took this subject seriously in the first place, we have to go back to his childhood, when he would sit with his grandfather and listen to stories about objects in space that are so dense that even light cannot escape from them. His grandfather was a nuclear physicist. Interestingly, the story of the black hole was, for young Danny at that time, a story about a monster. On one hand, he felt fear because the monster was real. On the other hand, he felt a strange sense of relief because his grandfather was able to prove its existence. His grandfather always told him, nature hides no secrets from us. Discovering them is only a matter of having the right tools. Importantly, Goler was not a researcher. He was a video editor. He would spend hours working on the image, the color, thousands of tiny cuts. And then, like many others, in the last decade he smoked DMT. And something suddenly changed. He began to experiment until he reached a point where he no longer saw pretty fractals or mechanical elves. He saw something that didn't look like a hallucination. He was looking at a room behind the room. A place that at that moment was sharper and more real than his own kitchen, his body, or even the memory of his own name. He experienced something that is often described by many as more real than reality itself. And something inside him broke. In such a situation, you have two options. You can decide that your brain is playing tricks on you because you've chemically intoxicated it. That's it. That's the whole philosophy. Or you can go the spiritual route and start getting interested in esotericism and mechanical elves. Goler rejected both of these paths and did something unusual. He treated it as a challenge. And he began to analyze. If that space is real, then it must be governed by some laws. It must have geometry, topology. There must be some kind of door, because sometimes he managed to enter it and sometimes he didn't. So he was crossing some kind of boundary. Goler started to become obsessed with this. He searched for answers for years. How can you prove that that place is real? And at this point, the story is about to get stranger and stranger. Podani started receiving clues. He didn't hear voices, but strange coincidences began to appear in his life, which most of us would simply ignore. But he started writing everything down. For example, Goler was walking at night thinking about light. He looked at the sidewalk where someone had imprinted a sequence of numbers into the wet concrete. He took out his phone, snapped a photo, and at home, he entered those numbers into a scientific search engine. And then a single unique link popped up on the entire internet. A document from CERN, the Swiss Institute for Nuclear Research. This document concerned the decay of the Higgs boson and explained how light can carry hidden information. For De Galera, it wasn't proof, it was a clue. With each step, he adjusted his course until he concluded that he needed red light of a specific wavelength. The beam can't be a sharp dot, it has to pass through a diffraction grating. He prepared the place, lit up the DMT, and then, for the first time in his life, the wall stopped being just an ordinary wall. Hey there. As I mentioned in previous videos, we're really close to reaching 50,000 subscribers. That's why I encourage you to subscribe. I promise that for a while I'll stop. Experiment. Goler conducted his experiment in basements and other people's kitchens. Recently, he even locked himself in a Faraday cage in a laboratory in New Jersey. He did it in order to eliminate electromagnetic noise so there would be no question of any interference. Goler uses matte black foam because it doesn't generate random reflections. Thanks to this, you can easily focus on the pattern, which of course is only visible when the person is under the influence of DMT. The dose of this substance itself is supposed to be low. You don't completely take off, you stand firmly on the edge. It's crucial that you keep your eyes open. You need to know exactly where you are standing, and you have to talk to the person supervising the whole trip. After a minute, you start to see patterns. Your arms drop, your breathing slows down, your jaw makes that characteristic movement, and you hear the instruction. Goler says don't try to focus directly on the light. Almost everyone has trouble with it at the very beginning because your eyes automatically want to focus. They're looking for something bright, specific, and stable. Goler says to let go. To let go, relax, and look at the pattern as if you were looking out a window. Most people see the same thing. In depth, the foam suddenly becomes transparent. Behind it, a space the size of an entire wall opens up in which something is moving. In New Jersey, one of the guests said he felt as if he were looking inside a huge sphere filled with swirling dots. He felt as if he were looking through a window. Almost everyone sees rows of symbols stretching into infinity on the other side. Most often, it's Goler. He compares them to Japanese katakana, ancient Aramaic, and Hebrew. All of this literally resembles the falling cat from the Matrix. No one can read these symbols, but almost everyone sees them. But the most interesting thing is that when you take the laser in your hand and move it, for example, to the right, the symbols on the other side don't move, as if they were an inseparable part of something. And seriously, I understand if you're starting to wonder in your head, what is this guy even talking to me about? And you feel like sending me a palette wrapped in aluminum foil? It's cool, I get it. In general, you should be careful because DMT itself is not a 2% rattler. This is a serious psychedelic that will probably allow you to make contact with your neighbor, only from another dimension. When you ask a user for a number, he says, about 6 out of 10 people see signs the first time. Another 3 make contact on the second try. 1 person out of 10 that doesn't see anything, ever. And these numbers could be real evidence. The question is, evidence of what? Truer than reality. Our eyes are not a lens that records an image, and the brain is not a camera. A video camera that plays a movie in our heads. Our brain, relying on a handful of external stimuli and a powerful set of assumptions, creates the world from scratch. All of this holds together only and exclusively because we have thick and dense filters that block over 90% of information coming from the outside. And when you take DMT, those filters go up in smoke. And according to Goler, what you see then is something like a loading screen in a computer game. In 2019, a researcher from London, Christopher Timmerman, conducted an unusual experiment. He took sober people, connected them to a functional MRI and EEG, and gave them an IV drip, with the main character of this episode, that is, dimethyltryptamine, and then observed what happens to their brains when they are in another galaxy. The results went down in history. Under the influence of DMT, alpha waves, that calm, stable rhythm of your brain, simply collapse. In a second, the default settings of your mind, which you've been running on practically since birth, are switched off. And then comes the fire, the diversity of signals, the amount of processing instantly hits the ceiling, pure chaos enters, and the brain loads more data at once than during deep sleep or while awake. This phenomenon is called the entropic brain. DMT completely dissolves the barrier between perception and imagination. And you may feel that this experience is more real than reality itself. In 2019, John Dean, he studied the brain of a rat to look for DMT in it. He expected to find some minor traces and that's it. To his surprise, instead, he discovered a concentration equal to the levels of serotonin and dopamine, the chemicals that are crucial for humans to function. It turned out that the rat's brain produces this psychedelic almost on an industrial scale, and the human brain most likely does exactly the same. It's worth pausing for a moment to sum things up. So, the substance that makes you see matrix code and teleport to another dimension after taking it is constantly present in our bodies. Great. But what do we actually need it for? No one has any idea. There are some speculations, dying dreams, but these are just shots in the dark. And this leads us straight to the neuroscientist. Andrew Gallimore, the author of Alien Information Theory, and one of the few people who treated DMT trips as hard data rather than just random noise. He was the one who came up with the DMTX protocol, a system for administering this psychedelic via IV drip. Usually, a trip is a short affair. You drop in for 5 minutes, look around, but before you really get a chance to take it all in, the effects of DMT wear off. DMT IV drips keep you on the other side, long enough for you to go inside, calmly explore everything, and make a report about it. A report. And what people started to report didn't make things any easier for anyone. The job. It turns out that, under longer observation, this space doesn't fade away like a dream at all. It stabilizes, the architecture solidifies, the space becomes brutally coherent, and the entities, whatever they are still standing there, looking you straight in the eyes. Exactly. If things have seemed strange to you so far, then listen to this. Up until now, I've only told you about the code and the hidden space, but that's not all, because on the other side, entities have also been observed, and Goler himself believes that there's no question of any planned meeting with these beings. He claims that he simply catches them at work. He's an uninvited guest. In this case, the laser doesn't work like a doorbell, but more like a spotlight turned on in a dark office at 3 in the morning, when the workers are quietly busy with inventory. And this is where he appears, a figure dubbed the Frogman or Frog Human. And this isn't some luminous being, an angel nor multidimensional geometry. Goler describes a being that looked like a cross between a frog, a diver, and a lizard, tinkering with the code of reality. This being resembles something like a technician who, in his server room, encounters a human, that is, someone who doesn't belong there. And okay, Goler is hallucinating, but the thing is, hallucinations usually don't interact with you. And the thing on the other side of the wall notices the laser light, turns toward it, and looks him straight in the eyes. The frogman suddenly freezes like a worker caught sleeping on the night shift, as if he's waiting for you to finally turn off the laser and let him go back to sleep. No unnecessary philosophical deliberations. Goler says there's definitely someone there. Let's establish the facts. It's someone's home, someone lives there. Goler doesn't try to guess what these beings are, but he believes there's some kind of hierarchy among them. Some entities can only be sensed in the air like a weight, a formless gust of something powerful. And those physical figures, which, according to Danny, operate the cat, and literally create the world around us, are insectoids. Giant 2-meter-long mantises with cool, intelligent eyes. Goler calls them weavers and speculates that their job is to take care of the mesh from which our reality is constructed. Interestingly, Goler is not a pioneer when it comes to observing strange beings inhabiting the DMT domain. The psychedelic legend Terence McKenna, for 40 years he spoke about machine elves. According to him, they are not made of flesh like us, but of living luminous matter. McKenna claimed that they are a kind of self-aware algorithm that renders our world in real time. The similarities between what McKenna said and what Goler describes are therefore clear and noticeable. For Danny Goler, the turning point that preceded all his laser experiments was, in fact, it was a single trip. One day, Danny, sitting on the porch of his house in Pasadena, took a huge dose, DMT, which suddenly made him find himself in the garden, the city and mountains in the background. Huge satellite dishes emerged from behind the house, covered with hundreds of symbols resembling those you can see in a laser beam. And then his neighborhood simply started to disappear. The whole street, the cars, the trees, everything started to shed its textures. Danny could only see the geometric wireframe skeleton of the world, and then he heard a heavy metallic clang that he felt in his bones. And he saw something like a crane the size of a skyscraper holding a model. His neighborhood turned upside down, which would then be arranged like some kind of Lego blocks. The image began to close in with bands. In zigzags, the textures of the asphalt and the lawns were loading in. People landed in front of their houses in a split second as if someone was pasting them into the scene. Dogs froze in midair, only to move on a moment later as if the system was just testing the pause function. And in the end, all of this closed right in front of the guy's face. And there was perfect, unnatural silence. Whew, that sounds like quite a trip. And now imagine experiencing something like that yourself. What are you even supposed to think about that? So Danny, he doesn't go into mysticism. He focuses more on the technicalities and outright states that we are living in a simulation. He used to think that knowing we live in a simulation wouldn't change anything, because if you stub your little toe on a door frame, it's still going to hurt. Over time, however, he changed his mind and started using one particular term more and more often: a simulated accident. It's no wonder, because if you accept that the simulation is real, you'll realize you have no control over your life. In this world, you might start to feel like an NPC whose actions are predetermined. And I completely understand if you're feeling uncomfortable right now and want to leave me a comment telling me to take my meds. I get it. But wait, go ahead if you want to write it, a comment, but now let me tell you what scientists have to say about this. Simulation. Imagine a gigantic pyramid. At its peak lies our universe, the base. And beneath it, every subsequent simulation that this universe has managed to generate. Within each simulation, new ones are created by mysterious entities. Everything loops endlessly, a simulation within a simulation. Thousands of levels of the pyramid, billions of virtual copies. Since there are billions of simulations for every real world, the chances that we were born in the original version of the universe are slim. And it is precisely this argument that forms the foundation of a famous 2003 publication by Oxford philosopher Nick B. Bostrom. His article made the simulation theory more than just a far-fetched idea. After the release of The Matrix, it firmly established itself in academic circles. In his 30-page article, Bostrom tries to answer the question of whether humans live in a computer simulation. He based his considerations on the so-called trilemma. You have to choose one of three options. The first assumes that civilizations like ours self-destruct before reaching a technological level. That would allow them to simulate reality. The second option assumes that civilizations reach this level but completely lose interest in simulating reality. The third option says that if the first and second points are nonsense, then we are already living in a simulation. For the past 20 years, this text has been verified and analyzed by thousands of scholars, and in fact, no one has been able to reasonably refute it. Today, scientists openly say that the third option is the most reasonable choice, and quantum physics seems to confirm all of this. Logic suggests that you should be able to divide real space infinitely into smaller and smaller pieces. But our cosmos doesn't work that way, at least according to physicists. The Planck length is the ultimate smallest piece of space which cannot be divided any further. Why does such a limit exist in the real world? After all, nature doesn't have to operate with a specific amount of RAM, but a computer does. It's the computer that hates infinity. This hard limit exists so that the system has a specific resolution and doesn't eat up all the RAM. That's why the Planck length could simply be physical pixels from which our reality is rendered. And to that we add Planck time. It's the smallest unit of time that we are physically able to describe. Anything that happens below this threshold is a total wall for today's science, and mathematics simply breaks down there. Time does not flow as a single uninterrupted stream. It jumps, just like a game engine, like a video when it loads the next frame. That's the FPS of our reality. Let's add the speed of light to that. Nothing in the universe can move faster. A physicist will tell you that's just how our space-time is built. But if you look at it from a programmer's perspective, the conclusion is obvious. It looks like a classic artificial limit in the code. A hard cap designed to make sure the system can keep up with loading the environment and that the server doesn't get overloaded. And sure, you might now say that I've gone a bit off the rails, and you could also argue that I'm bending the facts, taking physical phenomena and forcibly calling them code or pixels just to make them fit the simulation theory. And that's a perfectly reasonable objection. But at this point, digital physics enters the stage, a field that seriously posits our universe as a gigantic computational system. It used to be thought that information was just something we stored on a disk. Today, people like Edward Fredkin, a distinguished computer scientist from MIT, or physicist Stephen Wolfram, have spent years building models that turn these beliefs upside down. According to them, matter and energy are not the absolute foundation of reality at all. If you looked at our world through the most powerful hypothetical microscope possible, at the very end, you wouldn't see any matter or physical blocks. You would see ordinary zeros and ones, which are constantly being calculated just like in a computer program. This hard physical world that you are touching now, all the matter around you, is in fact only the final result of these powerful continuous calculations. And then there's the holographic principle, which Goler mentions quite often. Its operation is relatively simple. Do you remember those shiny stickers with a hologram? When you run your finger over them, they are completely flat. But when you look at them, you can see three-dimensional depth. Scientists seriously assume that our universe works in exactly the same way. The mug on your desk, your hand, the entire room you're sitting in right now could all just be a generated three-dimensional illusion. Does this mean that science has just confirmed that Goler, after taking DMT, actually saw the source code of our reality? I have no idea. Maybe it was nothing more than just hallucinations. But when you combine the observations of hundreds of people with what physicists are currently working on, you start to have doubts. Are you sure this guy's just a spaced-out hippie from a basement? To take his story seriously, you don't have to believe in ghosts, creators, or insectoid aliens. All you need to assume is that the cosmos is simply pure information, and that this guy, with the help of a specific dose of chemicals and light, managed for a moment to peek behind the backstage of the universe. Maybe the guy just found a glitch in the matrix, and just when everything seems to fit together into a perfect coherent whole, neurologists enter the scene and they have a completely different perspective on the matter. According to them, Goler is not a liar. He really is looking at some kind of code, and he didn't make it up at all. Except that what he sees on the wall isn't the code of the universe at all. It's his own code. An interface. When you delete a file from your desktop on your computer, you're not digging into the raw code. You just click on an icon, which is part of the system interface, which in turn was created to make your everyday use of the computer easier. And what if evolution did the same thing? The same thing with our brain, and the world around us is just such an interface. Donald Hoffman, a professor of cognitive sciences at the University of California, has spent the last 30 years studying, among other things, this very issue. He started by questioning everything we take for granted. The face of your loved one, the smell of coffee, the blue of the sky. Hoffman asserts with full conviction that what you experience is not objective reality at all. It's simply an interface generated by your own brain. A set of useful illusions tailored solely to ensure the survival of our species. Most importantly, this is not just a loose philosophical thesis. Hoffman has proven it. He did so using hard mathematics and computer simulations. He created a virtual environment in which he pitted two species against each other. One group of organisms saw the world 100% as it is. They objectively perceived the raw truth and all the physical complexity of their environment. The other group saw only a radical simplification limited to what allowed them to eat and survive. Another day, after hundreds of thousands of simulations, the result was merciless. Organisms that saw the objective truth died out rapidly, overwhelmed by an excess of useless data. Those that saw a simplified world always won. Hoffman called this a theorem. Fitness beats truth. In the course of evolution, effectiveness always triumphs over objective truth. Sometimes this interface can freeze during clinical death, deep meditation, or powerful shocks to the body when the operating system of our brain starts to lag. The image of reality loses its coherence, and we begin to notice the seams that hold our perception together. This is exactly where Goler struck. If Hoffman's theory is true, then Danny didn't actually see how the simulation works. He simply experienced the malfunction of his own interface, stripped of its graphical layer by the laser and dimethyltryptamine. And those rows of characters resembling katakana weren't the source code of the universe, but the code of his own brain. But why those particular characters and symbols? The explanation is simple. When the system is flooded with raw data after the filters are turned off, the brain desperately searches for any logic in that noise. It tries to make sense of the chaos using the only tools it knows: language and symbols. But this raises a question that strikes at the very foundations of our existence. If this whole world you see is you, just a safe graphical overlay, what is really lurking underneath, and are we even capable of accepting it? A simulation. When you take an ordinary laser pointer in your hand, aim it at the wall, and deliberately look at that small dot, Letting your eyes lose focus, you'll notice that it boils. The glowing specks of light are constantly moving, drifting, and reorganizing within that single point. In physics, we call this the speckle phenomenon. It's raw optical noise resulting from imperfections on the surface that the light reflects off of. Your brain spends your whole life learning to ignore it. It categorizes it as an irrelevant image error and simply suppresses it so as not to overload the system. But DMT completely shuts off this filter. And this is where the neuroscientist I mentioned earlier comes into play, Professor Andrew Gallimore. He's a researcher who analyzes the effects of psychedelics on the mind in a cool-headed way, without mocking the visions of people like Goler. Gallimore explains this mechanism in a very simple way. DMT drastically disrupts the alpha wave in the brain, causing our natural reality filter to simply break down. In a split second, your nervous system loses track of what your eyes are actually seeing and what you are feeling in yourself at that moment. The brain starts to treat your own thoughts, associations, and remembered images as if they physically appeared before you on the wall. If, while in such a state, you start looking at Azer's beam, your brain will start to fight back because it can't stand chaos. At all costs, it will try to piece together what it sees into some kind of whole. It will start arranging rows, grids, and lines. It will start looking for anything that makes sense, some kind of pattern, something that is familiar to it. If you grew up in Western pop culture, watched The Matrix, and are familiar with Japanese katakana, your brain will simply pull those characters from memory and overlay them onto the chaotic drops of light. Instead of the codes of the universe, Goler might have seen how his mind, in an act of desperation, clung to motifs familiar to him. Gallimore also wonders why an alien intelligence, or why would the operating system of the universe write its source code using an alphabet invented by Japanese monks in the 9th century. A programmer operating on the level of galaxies and atoms would hardly use a human alphabet. Why would the fundamental code of reality be readable to our eyes at all? And what about the statistical argument? If dozens of people see the same thing under the influence of DMT, doesn't that mean this hidden world actually exists? According to Gallimore, no. These people simply share the same biology of the human species and the same culture. They have identical patterns in their heads from science fiction movies, so their glitched brains generate the same repetitive error. They throw the same symbols into the same basket, so the question remains: who is right? 4 options. It's interesting how little it takes to undermine our entire reality. We didn't need a multi-billion-dollar hadron collider for that, nor some kind of supercomputer. It was enough. A laser, a piece of acoustic foam, and a fraction of a gram of a substance that shuts off the brain's safety switches. This unusual set was undoubtedly the spark that somewhat revived the discussion about what our world is really made of. Sure, this discussion has been going on forever, but Goler's discovery is undoubtedly something new. Let's take a look together at 4 hypotheses that try to explain what Danny Goler and the participants in his experiment actually experienced. Goler himself believes that he made a breakthrough. He believes that with the help of the laser and DMT, he hacked the barrier of our world and looked straight into the source code of the proverbial matrix. If this is true, then everything around us, my YouTube video, your room, and memories, are just a program that generates reality in real time, and what people saw on the wall was a glitch in texture loading. The ultimate proof that we are just NPCs in someone else's game. Donald Hoffman doesn't need alien entities or supercomputers to make you think. In his theory, no one has locked us in a giant simulation. It's simply our own brain. It constantly generates the world before our eyes. From this perspective, Goler didn't peek behind the scenes. He just triggered a simple malfunction in his own brain, which perhaps allowed him to cross the natural boundaries of human perception. The third concept is probably the most controversial, because it assumes that DMT physically removes our biological protective filters and opens a window to other dimensions that are right next to us all the time. The beings, those great insectoids, they really are there. They tinker with the fabric of reality, and for a split second we become uninvited guests in their server room. The fourth option is probably the most sober perspective on this phenomenon. Andrew Gallimore believes that the entire experience of a given user is nothing more than a pure, fascinating, but 100% biological malfunction of their system. A brain flooded with chemicals cannot ignore the optical noise of the laser, so in a desperate act, it pulls pop culture references from memory, symbols known from science fiction movies, and displays them before human eyes. So what is the truth? Be sure to let us know in the comments which option convinces you the most. And see you in the next video. See ya.